The dust on Sarah Emerson's boots was older than the bread she was trying to make her 3 children believe would fill their bellies, and she knew with a sinking certainty that tomorrow there would be nothing at all. She stood in the cramped cabin on the outskirts of Oro Grande, New Mexico territory, watching her daughter Mary slice the single loaf into impossibly thin pieces while her sons Thomas and James waited with the patient resignation of children who had learned not to complain. The year was 1878, and it had been 14 months since cholera took her husband Robert during the outbreak that swept through the mining camps. 14 months of watching her children grow thinner, their clothes more tattered, their eyes dimmer. Mary was 10 now, Thomas 8, and James barely 6, and Sarah was 24 years old, feeling like she had lived 100 lifetimes. The mining work that Robert had done was closed to her, and the few jobs available to women in Oro Grande paid barely enough to keep a roof over their heads, let alone feed 3 growing children. She had taken in mending when she could get it, scrubbed floors at the saloon before dawn, and picked through the refuse behind the general store for vegetables too bruised to sell, but still edible. Pride was a luxury she had surrendered long ago, somewhere between burying her husband and watching Thomas faint from hunger at school. "Mama, I am not very hungry tonight," Mary said, pushing her slice toward James. "You take mine, Jamie." Sarah felt her heart crack a little more. Mary had been saying that almost every night for a week now, and the girl's dress hung on her frame like a scarecrow's costume. "Mary Elizabeth, you eat that bread right now." "But Mama, now." The girl took a tiny bite, chewing slowly to make it last. Sarah turned away so they would not see the tears threatening to spill. She had $1.30 to her name. The landlord wanted $3 for next month's rent by the end of the week, and she had no idea where she would find it. The thought that kept her awake at night, the one she tried desperately to suppress, was that her children might be better off in an orphanage. At least there they would eat. She would not do it. She would die first. But the thought came anyway, unwelcome and persistent, whispering that love sometimes meant letting go. The knock on the door startled them all. It was past 8 in the evening, and visitors were rare. Sarah wiped her eyes quickly and smoothed her worn dress before opening the door a crack. A man stood on the weathered porch, hat in his hands, the lamplight from inside catching the concern in his dark eyes. She recognized him vaguely from town, one of the cowboys who worked the cattle ranches in the territory, though she did not know his name. Mrs. Emerson. His voice was gentle, respectful. "My name is Matthew Brennan. I apologize for the late hour." "What can I do for you, Mr. Brennan?" Sarah kept her voice steady, though her mind raced through possibilities, none of them good. Had she unknowingly broken some law? Did someone claim she owed money? Matthew shifted his weight, looking uncomfortable. "I was in town today at Henderson's store. I could not help but overhear Mr. Henderson telling his wife that he had to turn you away this morning when you asked about credit for food." He cleared his throat. "I took the liberty of settling your account with him and having some provisions delivered tomorrow. I hope that was not too forward of me." Sarah felt the blood drain from her face. Charity. The word burned in her mind even as her stomach clenched with the knowledge of how desperately they needed it. "Mr. Brennan, I cannot accept, please." He held up a hand, his weathered face earnest. "I know what you are going to say, but I also know what it is to watch children go hungry. My sister's family back in Texas, after her husband was killed in the war. I was just a boy myself, but I remember wishing someone would help and no one did." His jaw tightened. "My nephew died before he saw his 5th birthday. I swore then that if I ever had the means, I would not stand by and let children starve. I have my pride, Mr. Brennan." But even as she said it, Sarah could hear how hollow it sounded. What was pride compared to her children's lives? I am not asking you to give up your pride, madam. I am asking you to let me help, just until you get on your feet. He met her eyes directly. I have a ranch about 5 miles north of town. It is not much yet, but it is growing. I could use someone to help with the house, cooking for the hands during roundup, that sort of thing. It would be honest work, honest pay. And there is a small house on the property better than, he stopped himself, but Sarah knew what he had been about to say. Better than this falling down cabin. Mama! Mary had appeared at her elbow, her thin face upturned. Who is it? Matthew looked down at the girl, and Sarah saw something shift in his expression, a tightening around his eyes that spoke of old pain and present resolve. He crouched down to Mary's level. Hello there. My name is Matthew. I am a friend of your mother's. We do not have very much food to offer you, Mary said with the brutal honesty of children, but you can share our bread if you like. Matthew was quiet for a moment. When he spoke, his voice was rough. That is very kind of you, miss, but I just ate a big supper. I was actually coming to ask your mother if she might be interested in a job opportunity. Thomas and James had joined their sister now, 3 pairs of eyes watching the stranger with cautious hope. Sarah felt the walls she had built around her heart beginning to crumble. This man was offering them a lifeline, and she could not afford to refuse it, no matter what it cost her pride. What exactly would you need me to do? She asked carefully. Matthew straightened. Cooking, mostly, especially during busy seasons. Some cleaning, mending. The house has 5 bedrooms, but only mine is being used. The hands have their own bunkhouse. You and your children would have your own space, your privacy. He paused. And of course, there would be food. The ranch has beef, chickens, a vegetable garden, milk cows. Whatever you and your children need. And the wages, $20 a month plus room and board. It was more than fair. It was generous. Sarah felt suspicion rise despite herself. Why? The question came out more sharply than she intended. Why are you doing this? Matthew held her gaze steadily. Because I can. Because those children deserve better. And because I think you are trying as hard as any person could, and sometimes trying hard is not enough without a bit of help. He put his hat back on. Think about it, Mrs. Emerson. The provisions will be delivered tomorrow regardless. If you decide to take the job, come out to the Brennan Ranch anytime. If not, no hard feelings, but at least your children will have food for a few weeks. He was turning to leave when Sarah heard herself say, Mr. Brennan. He stopped, looking back at her. We will come. Tomorrow, if that suits you. I will not take charity, but I will work for wages, and I will work hard. The smile that crossed his face was like sunrise. Tomorrow will be just fine, madam. I will send a wagon for you and your things at 10 o'clock. After he left, Sarah closed the door and leaned against it, her legs suddenly weak. Mary tugged at her skirt. Mama, are we really going to have food? Sarah knelt and gathered all 3 of her children into her arms, letting the tears fall freely now. Yes, baby. Yes, we are going to have food. Everything is going to be all right. That night, for the first time in months, Sarah did not lie awake worrying about where the next meal would come from. Instead, she wondered about Matthew Brennan, about what kind of man offered help to strangers, and whether this was too good to be true. But exhaustion overtook suspicion, and she slept more deeply than she had since Robert died. The wagon arrived promptly at 10 o'clock, driven by a weathered older man who introduced himself as Charlie, the ranch foreman. Their possessions fit easily into the back, a sad testament to how little they owned. The ride to the ranch took about 40 minutes, the wagon rolling through the high desert landscape of sage and juniper, with the Sangre de Cristo Mountains rising in the distance. It was late September, and the air had that crystalline quality that comes just before autumn truly settles in. The ranch house came into view as they crested a low hill, and Sarah felt her breath catch. It was not a mansion by any means, but compared to the cabin they had been living in, it might as well have been a palace. 2 stories, built of adobe and wood, with a wide porch wrapping around the front and side. The house sat in a small valley with a creek running through it, cottonwood trees providing shade. She could see the bunkhouse off to one side, a large barn, several corrals with horses, and cattle dotting the hillsides in the distance. Matthew emerged from the barn as they pulled up, wiping his hands on his pants. He was tall, Sarah realized, probably in his early 30s, with the lean, strong build of a man who worked hard for his living. His hair was dark brown, sun-streaked, and he moved with an easy confidence. "Mrs. Emerson, children, welcome. Let me show you around." The inside of the house was even better than the outside. The main room was spacious, with a large fireplace, comfortable furniture, and windows that let in abundant light. The kitchen was bigger than the entire cabin they had been living in, with a proper stove, a pump for water right inside, and shelves lined with dishes and cookware. Matthew led them upstairs to 3 bedrooms, each simply but comfortably furnished. "I thought the children could each have their own room or share if they prefer," Matthew said. "And this one here would be yours, Mrs. Emerson. It has a lock on the door for your privacy." Sarah noticed that detail, appreciated it. He was being careful to make clear this was a proper arrangement, nothing untoward. She felt some of her tension ease. "These are very nice, Mr. Brennan. Much more than I expected." "I built this house hoping to fill it with family someday," Matthew said, a trace of old sadness in his voice. "Did not quite work out that way, but at least now it will not be so empty." He smiled at the children. "There are fishing poles in the barn, and the creek has trout if you are patient. The horses are gentle if you want to learn to ride. And Cookie, that is our cook for the hands, he usually has something sweet around if you ask nicely." James, who had been mostly silent, spoke up shyly. "Really? We can fish anytime you want, son." Matthew's use of the word was casual, unconscious, but Sarah saw James's face light up. The boy had not had a father figure in so long. She would need to be careful about that. This was a job, a temporary arrangement until she could get back on her feet. She could not let her children get too attached. Even as she thought it, she knew it was probably too late for that. The provisions Matthew had purchased arrived that afternoon. Sarah watched in amazement as Charlie and another ranch hand unloaded sacks of flour, cornmeal, sugar, salt, coffee, beans, dried apples, and more. There were also fresh vegetables, eggs, bacon, a whole ham, and a basket of canned goods. It was more food than she had seen in one place in over a year. "This is too much," she protested to Matthew. "This must have cost a fortune." "It is just food, Mrs. Emerson, and you will earn your keep, do not worry. During roundup next month, we will have 20 men working the ranch, all needing 3 meals a day. You will wonder why you ever thought this was too much." But he was smiling as he said it. That evening, Sarah cooked her first meal in the ranch house kitchen. It felt strange, almost dreamlike, to have plenty of everything. She made a beef stew with vegetables, biscuits with real butter, and a dried apple pie for dessert. When she called the children to dinner, the looks on their faces made her want to cry again. "Is this all for us?" Thomas asked, staring at the laden table. "Every bite," Sarah said firmly. "And I want to see clean plates." Matthew joined them, having been invited somewhat awkwardly by Sarah, who was not quite sure of the protocol. Did the employer eat with the help? But he seemed to expect it, taking a seat at the head of the table naturally. "Mrs. Emerson, would you mind if I said grace?" She nodded, and they all bowed their heads. Matthew's prayer was simple and heartfelt, thanking God for new friends, for food and shelter, and asking blessings on the household. When he said amen, there was a moment of comfortable silence before everyone began to eat. "This is delicious," Matthew said after his first bite of stew. "My late mother would have approved. She always said the secret to good stew was patience and not being stingy with the salt." "Your mother taught you to cook?" Sarah asked, curious despite herself. "She taught me a lot of things. My father died when I was 12, so it was just the two of us for several years before she passed. She made sure I knew how to take care of myself." He took another bite. "Though I have to admit, my cooking is pretty basic. This is a real treat." The children ate with single-minded intensity, and Sarah had to remind them twice to slow down and chew properly. She could hardly blame them. The food was wonderful, and there was so much of it. When Matthew cut generous slices of pie for everyone, James actually giggled with delight. After dinner, while Sarah was washing dishes, Matthew came into the kitchen with his plate. "You do not have to do that tonight, Mrs. Emerson. You have had a long day." "I do not mind. I like to clean as I go." She glanced at him. "Mr. Brennan, I want to thank you again. This is more than I could have hoped for. I promise you I will work hard. You will not regret this." "I already know I will not regret it." He leaned against the counter, watching her work. "And please call me Matthew. Mr. Brennan makes me feel like my father." "Then you should call me Sarah." It felt too familiar, but also right somehow. Though in front of the ranch hands, perhaps we should keep it more formal. That is probably wise. Matthew was quiet for a moment. "Sarah, I want you to know that you and your children are safe here. This is your home now for as long as you need it. I know you have been through hard times, and I imagine it is not easy to accept help from a stranger. But I promise you, my intentions are honorable. I just want to help." Sarah turned to face him fully, wiping her hands on a dish towel. "Why, though? You still have not really answered that." "There are a lot of people struggling in this territory." "Why us?" Matthew was quiet for a long moment, his expression distant. 2 years ago, I was engaged to be married. Her name was Elizabeth. She was beautiful, smart, everything I thought I wanted. But when my ranch was just getting started and I was struggling, when I needed support most, she broke it off. Said she had not signed up to be poor, that she deserved better than a struggling rancher." He met Sarah's eyes. "I learned then that character shows itself in hard times. You could have given up. You could have abandoned your children to an orphanage and no one would have blamed you. But you kept fighting for them. That kind of love, that kind of strength, that deserves to be rewarded. I am their mother. What else would I do?" "You would be surprised what some people do." Matthew straightened. "Anyway, I should let you finish settling in. If you need anything at all, let me know." After he left, Sarah stood in the warm kitchen, the sounds of her children playing in the other room drifting in, and felt something she had not felt in a very long time. Hope. Maybe, just maybe, things really were going to be all right. The next few weeks fell into a comfortable rhythm. Sarah woke early to make breakfast for Matthew and the regular ranch hands. Simple but hearty meals of eggs, bacon, biscuits, and coffee. The children were enrolled in the small school in Oro Grande, and Matthew arranged for them to ride in with Charlie when he went to town for supplies. Mary blossomed with regular meals, her cheeks filling out, her energy returning. Thomas and James spent every free moment fishing in the creek or helping with small chores around the ranch, and Sarah watched them transform from listless, hungry children into normal, boisterous boys. As for Sarah herself, she found the work challenging but satisfying. The kitchen was a joy to work in, and she experimented with recipes she had not been able to make in years. Matthew was appreciative without being effusive, often complimenting her cooking but never making her feel uncomfortable. They fell into an easy companionship. talking over coffee in the mornings about the ranch, the weather, small happenings in town. She learned that he was 32, had been ranching in New Mexico for 5 years, and had built up his herd from almost nothing through hard work and smart management. He was respected in the area, known as fair and honest. He did not drink to excess, did not gamble, did not frequent the saloons beyond an occasional beer. He attended church in town most Sundays, and he invited Sarah and the children to join him, though he made clear it was not required. They went. Sarah had not been to church since Robert died, but sitting in the simple wooden building with her children beside her, their bellies full and their clothes clean, she found herself able to pray again. "Thank you," she prayed silently. "Thank you for sending us Matthew Brennan." It was mid-October when the roundup crew arrived, 20 men ready to work the cattle. Sarah had been preparing for days, and she had enlisted Mary to help. The girl was a quick learner and eager to contribute. Together they cooked enormous meals, sending food out to the bunkhouse 3 times a day, plus coffee and snacks mid-morning and mid-afternoon. It was exhausting work, and Sarah fell into bed each night bone-tired. But it was the good kind of tired, the kind that came from honest labor and accomplishment. And Matthew noticed. More than once she caught him watching her with an expression she could not quite read, something warm and appreciative and maybe something more. One evening, after a particularly long day, Sarah was cleaning up the kitchen when Matthew came in from checking on the night crew. "You should be asleep," he said. "You have been working since before dawn. Just finishing up. I cannot sleep when the kitchen is a mess." She scrubbed at a stubborn spot on a pot. "Besides, the children are already asleep. I do not need as much rest as they do." Matthew took the pot from her hands and set it aside. "Sarah, sit down, please." Something in his tone made her comply. She sat at the kitchen table and Matthew poured them both coffee before sitting across from her. "I want to talk to you about something." Her heart sank. Was he unhappy with her work? Had she done something wrong? If this is about the burnt biscuits yesterday, the biscuits were fine. "This is not about your work." He wrapped his hands around his coffee cup. "Your work is excellent. That is actually part of what I want to talk about. Sarah, you have been here a month now, and in that time, I have seen you work yourself to exhaustion trying to prove your worth. You do not have to do that. I want to earn my keep. You have earned it 10 times over. That is not what I mean." He paused, seeming to gather his thoughts. "What I mean is, I see you treating this like it is temporary, like at any moment I might change my mind and send you away. But I need you to understand, that is not going to happen. You and your children have a home here for as long as you want it. I need you to believe that." Sarah felt tears prick her eyes. "It is hard to believe in good things anymore. Every time I start to feel secure, something happens to pull the rug out. I know you have been through hell, and I know trust does not come easy. But Sarah, look at me." She did, meeting his steady gaze. "I give you my word as a man of honor that you are safe here. Your children are safe here. And more than that, He stopped, looking uncertain for the first time since she had known him. "I have come to care about what happens to you, all of you. You are not just my housekeeper, you are my friends. And I hope maybe in time we could be more than that." Sarah's breath caught. She had been so careful not to let herself think about Matthew that way, to keep everything professional and proper. But the truth was, she had been failing at that for weeks. She noticed everything about him, the way he was gentle with the animals, how he treated the ranch hands with respect, the patience he showed with her children. He was a good man, maybe the best man she had ever known, and somewhere along the way she had started to fall in love with him. "Matthew, I am not sure I am ready for that." The words hurt to say, but they were honest. "It has only been a little over a year since Robert died, and I have 3 children. I cannot afford to make a mistake." I am not asking you to make any decisions now." Matthew reached across the table, stopping just short of taking her hand, asking permission with his eyes. She nodded, and he covered her hand with his. His palm was warm, calloused from work. "I am just asking you to think about it, to be open to the possibility. Because, Sarah, I look at you and I see everything I have ever wanted: strength, kindness, courage. You are an amazing mother, an incredible woman, and I would count myself the luckiest man alive if you gave me a chance. You barely know me. I know enough. I know you love your children more than your own life. I know you are not afraid of hard work. I know you have integrity and pride and resilience. I know that when you smile, really smile, it lights up the whole room. And I know that every day I wake up thankful that I walked past Henderson's store at exactly the right moment to overhear him talking about you." Sarah felt tears spilling over now. "What if I cannot love you the way you deserve? What if my heart is too broken? Then we will take our time putting it back together." Matthew squeezed her hand gently. "I am not going anywhere, Sarah, and I am not asking for anything you are not ready to give. I just needed you to know how I feel so you are not wondering and worrying. Now you know. And you can take all the time you need to figure out how you feel about it." That night, lying in her comfortable bed in her locked room, Sarah thought about Matthew's words. Part of her wanted to run, to protect herself and her children from the possibility of more loss. But another part, a part that was growing stronger, wanted to take the risk. Wanted to believe that maybe, after all the darkness, there could be light again. The roundup finished successfully, and the extra crew moved on. The ranch settled back into its quieter routine, but something had shifted between Sarah and Matthew. They were more open with each other now, their conversations deeper. He told her about his childhood in Texas, about losing his parents, about the dream that had brought him to New Mexico. She told him about her life with Robert, about the happy years before the cholera came, about the desperate struggle afterward. "You still love him?" Matthew asked one evening as they sat on the porch watching the sunset. The children were playing by the creek, their laughter carrying on the cool air. Sarah considered the question carefully. "I will always love the memory of him, the life we had together. He was a good man, and he gave me 3 beautiful children. But he is gone, and I am still here. I have learned that love does not have to die just because a person does, but it also does not have to prevent you from loving again." "So you think you could love again?" She turned to look at him, this man who had saved her family, who asked for nothing but gave everything. "Yes," she said softly. "I think I could. I think maybe I already am." The smile that broke across Matthew's face was like sunlight. "Yeah? Yeah." She found herself smiling back, felt something warm and sweet unfurling in her chest. "But Matthew, I need you to understand what you would be taking on. 3 children who are not your own. A woman with no money, no prospects. The gossip in town when people realize we are courting. It will not be easy. I have never wanted easy, I just want real." He reached over and took her hand, and this time she laced her fingers through his without hesitation. "Those children are amazing. Mary is smart as a whip and kind-hearted. Thomas has the makings of a fine rancher if he wants to be. And James, that boy has more joy in his little finger than most men have in their whole body. It would be my honor to be part of their lives. And as for the money, I have plenty for all of us. And the gossip, well, let them talk. I have never cared much what people thought anyway." "You make it sound so simple." "Maybe it is. Maybe we are the ones making it complicated." Matthew raised her hand to his lips and kissed her knuckles gently. "Sarah Emerson, I am courting you officially, with your permission. You have my permission." The words felt like jumping off a cliff, terrifying and exhilarating all at once. "But we take it slow. I need to be sure for the children's sake. As slow as you need. But it turned out that slow was difficult when everything felt so right. Over the next weeks, Sarah found herself looking for excuses to be near Matthew. Their hands would brush while doing dishes, and neither would pull away. They would sit together in the evening talking long after the children were in bed. He brought her wildflowers from the range, and she made his favorite meals. The attraction between them grew like the heat of a slowly stoked fire, undeniable and consuming. The children noticed, of course. "Mama, do you like Matthew?" Mary asked one day while they were making bread together. Sarah felt her cheeks warm. "Yes, sweetie, I like him very much. How would you feel about that?" Mary was quiet for a moment, kneading her dough thoughtfully. "I miss Papa, I will always miss Papa, but Matthew is nice. He makes you smile again. And he is teaching Thomas how to rope cattle, and he takes James fishing. I think Papa would want us to be happy." "I think so too, baby." Sarah hugged her daughter, getting flour on both of them. "Nothing is decided yet, but I wanted you to know what I was feeling. You, Thomas, and James, you are the most important people in the world to me. I will not do anything unless you are all okay with it." "We are okay with it, Mama. We like it here. We like Matthew, and we like having enough food." Mary said it matter-of-factly, but the reminder of where they had come from sent a chill through Sarah. They had been so close to losing everything. They still would be without Matthew. As if summoned by her thoughts, Matthew appeared in the kitchen doorway. "Sorry to interrupt, but Charlie said one of the horses has gone lame, and I wanted to check with you, Sarah, about whether you need anything from town before I send him in." "I think we are fine, thank you." She smiled at him, and the way his expression softened made her heart skip. "Mary, how would you and your brothers like to come with me to check on the horse? You could learn a bit about veterinary care." "Really?" Mary's face lit up. "Can I, Mama, of course, go find your brothers?" After the children had scampered off, Matthew lingered. "You have flour on your nose." "I am making bread. It is an occupational hazard." She tried to wipe it off and only succeeded in spreading it more. Matthew laughed, a warm, rich sound that she had come to love. He stepped closer and gently brushed the flour away with his thumb. The touch was brief, innocent, but it sent electricity through her. Their eyes met and held. "Sarah," he said softly. "Yes, I am trying very hard to take things slow like you asked, but I need you to know it is about the hardest thing I have ever done. I know it is hard for me too." The admission cost her, but it was the truth. "How much longer do you need?" She searched his face, saw the love there, the patience, the hope, and she thought about her children, thriving and happy. She thought about herself, coming back to life after so long in the darkness. She thought about the future, which for the first time in over a year looked bright and full of possibility. "Not long," she whispered. "Not long at all." It was Thanksgiving when everything changed. Sarah had spent days preparing a feast, determined to celebrate all they had to be thankful for. The table was laden with roasted turkey, dressing, potatoes, carrots, fresh bread, cranberry sauce, and 3 different pies. The ranch hands were invited, along with a few friends from town, and the house rang with laughter and conversation. After the meal, Matthew stood and raised his glass of cider. "I want to say a few words, if I may." The room quieted. "A year ago, I was alone in this house, wondering if I was foolish for building something so big with no one to share it with. I had just about decided that maybe I was meant to be a bachelor, that maybe family was not in the cards for me. And then, about 2 months ago, I met someone who changed everything." Sarah felt her heart start to pound. Matthew's eyes found hers across the room. "Sarah Emerson walked into my life when she needed help, and I thought I was doing a good deed by offering it. But the truth is, she was the one who saved me. She and her children brought life and love into this house. They made it a home. And Sarah, You have shown me what true strength looks like, what real courage is. You have also shown me what it feels like to fall completely, hopelessly in love." There were gasps and murmurs around the room. Mary, Thomas, and James were grinning. Sarah could not breathe. Matthew crossed to where she sat, and to her shock, he got down on one knee. From his pocket, he pulled a small box. "Sarah Emerson, I know we have not been courting long by traditional standards, but I have never been more certain of anything in my life. I love you. I love your children. I want to spend the rest of my life making sure none of you ever know hunger or fear or want again. Will you marry me?" The room was silent, everyone waiting for her answer. Sarah looked at this man, this impossible, wonderful man who had appeared in her darkest hour like an answer to prayer. She thought about the promise she had made at Robert's grave to take care of their children no matter what, and she realized that accepting Matthew's love was not betraying that promise, it was fulfilling it. "Yes," she said, her voice strong and sure. "Yes, Matthew, I will marry you." The room erupted in cheers and applause. Matthew slipped the ring onto her finger, a simple gold band with a small diamond, and then he stood and pulled her into his arms. The kiss was gentle, almost chaste, mindful of the audience, but it held the promise of all the kisses to come. Her children rushed over, wrapping their arms around both of them, and Matthew gathered them all into an embrace. "I want you three to know something," he said, addressing the children directly. "I am not trying to replace your father. No one could do that. But I promise you, I will love you and protect you and provide for you as if you were my own blood. You will never want for anything, not food, not shelter, and especially not love." "Does this mean we can call you Pa?" James asked, his 6-year-old face serious. Matthew's eyes glistened. "I would be honored if you did, son, truly honored." "Can we live here forever?" Thomas wanted to know. "Forever and ever," Matthew confirmed. Mary, always the most thoughtful, asked, "Will you be a good husband to Mama? Will you make her happy?" "I will spend every day of my life trying," Matthew promised. "Your mother is the most remarkable woman I have ever known, and I will never take her for granted." The girl studied him for a moment, then nodded. "Okay then, welcome to our family." The simple acceptance, the grace of it, brought tears to Sarah's eyes. Her children, who had been through so much, were opening their hearts to this new beginning, and she was going to let herself do the same. They were married 3 weeks later, in the small church in Oro Grande on a bright December morning. Sarah wore a dress that Matthew had insisted on buying for her, a beautiful blue silk that made her feel like a princess. Mary was her bridesmaid, and Thomas and James stood up with Matthew. The church was full of well-wishers, people who had known Sarah in her darkest days and who genuinely celebrated her happiness now. When the preacher pronounced them man and wife, Matthew kissed her with a tenderness that promised a lifetime of such kisses. They walked out of the church together, a family now in truth as well as in heart, and Sarah felt like she was floating. The wedding celebration was held at the ranch, and it seemed like half of Oro Grande came. There was food and music and dancing. Sarah danced with her new husband, with her children, with Charlie, and the other ranch hands who had become like uncles to her kids. She danced until her feet hurt and her face ached from smiling. As the evening wore down and the guests began to leave, Matthew found her on the porch watching the stars. "Happy?" he asked, wrapping his arms around her from behind. "Happier than I ever thought I would be again." She leaned back against his chest, solid and warm. "I keep waiting to wake up and find this is all a dream. It is real. We are real." He turned her in his arms to face him. "Sarah Brennan, you are my wife, and I intend to spend the rest of my life making sure you never regret it. I could never regret this. You saved us, Matthew. You saved my children and you saved me." "No," he said firmly. "You saved yourselves. You never gave up, even when you had every reason to. All I did was give you a safe place to land. The strength was always yours." Their wedding night was everything Sarah had hoped for and more. Matthew was gentle, patient, passionate, everything she could have wanted. And afterward, lying in his arms in the bed they would share for the rest of their lives, Sarah sent up a silent prayer of thanks. For this man, for this second chance, for the beautiful life stretching out before them. The winter passed in a haze of happiness. Sarah had never known it was possible to be this content. The children thrived under Matthew's care. He taught Thomas and James to ride properly, to rope cattle, to shoot. He taught Mary to keep the ranch books, recognizing her head for numbers. But more than the practical skills, he taught them that they were valued, that they were loved unconditionally, and that they had a permanent place in his heart and his home. As for Sarah, she fell more in love with her husband every day. He was everything Robert had been and more, strong and kind and utterly devoted to his family. He never made her feel like she owed him for rescuing them. Instead, he treated her like a partner, an equal, asking her opinion on ranch matters and trusting her judgment. Their physical relationship deepened and grew, the initial shy explorations giving way to a passionate connection that left them both breathless and satisfied. Matthew was an attentive lover, always making sure of her pleasure, and Sarah discovered a sensuality she had not known she possessed. In March, Sarah began to suspect she might be pregnant. She waited to be sure before telling Matthew, but when the signs became unmistakable, she chose a quiet evening when the children were asleep to share the news. "I have something to tell you," she said as they sat together in the parlor, her knitting in her lap and his ranch ledgers spread on the table before him. "What is it?" He looked up, immediately attentive. "I am going to have a baby. We are going to have a baby." For a moment, Matthew just stared at her, then his face broke into the biggest smile she had ever seen. "Sarah, truly, truly. I am about 3 months along, I think. The baby should come in September." Matthew was across the room in an instant, pulling her up into his arms, spinning her around. "A baby, our baby," he set her down carefully, suddenly worried. "Is this too much spinning? Should you be sitting? Do you need anything?" She laughed, delighted by his reaction. "I am fine. Pregnant women are not made of glass. But Matthew, are you happy? I know this was not planned." "Happy." "Sarah, I am thrilled, absolutely thrilled." He placed his hand gently on her stomach, where there was not yet any sign of the life growing within. "A baby, our child, I cannot believe it. How do you think the children will react? They will be excited, trust me." And he was right. When they told Mary, Thomas, and James the next morning at breakfast, the children were overjoyed. "A baby," Mary exclaimed. "Can I help take care of it?" "I hope it is a boy," James said. "Then we will have 3 boys and 2 girls, and boys will win." "That is not how it works," Thomas said with the superiority of an older brother, but he was grinning too. "Either way, it will be nice to have a baby around." The pregnancy progressed smoothly. Matthew was attentive to the point of being comical, insisting Sarah not lift anything heavy, not work too hard, rest frequently. She tolerated his fussing with good humor, knowing it came from love. The children were excited, constantly asking when the baby would come, suggesting names, arguing over whether it would be a brother or sister. The ranch continued to prosper. The cattle business was good that year, and Matthew made several shrewd deals that expanded their holdings. He consulted with Sarah on all of it, valued her opinion, and split the profits evenly between them. He insisted on opening a bank account in her name, wanting her to have her own money, her own security. It was one more way he showed that he saw her as a true partner. Summer arrived, hot and dry as always in New Mexico territory. Sarah's belly swelled, and the baby became active, kicking strong enough that Matthew could feel it when he placed his hand on her stomach. "That is my son," he would say proudly, and Sarah would remind him it might be a daughter, and he would say he would be just as proud either way. In early September, a few weeks before the baby was due, Sarah was sitting on the porch shelling peas when she felt the first contraction. It was not painful, just a tightening, but she knew immediately what it meant. She called for Matthew, who had been working in the barn, and by the time he reached her, she was having another one. "It is time," she said, managing to sound calm despite the flutter of nerves in her stomach. "You should send for the doctor." Matthew went pale. "Right? Yes, the doctor, Charlie." He was practically running. "Charlie, ride for town, get Dr. Morrison, the baby is coming." Sarah had to laugh despite another contraction. "Matthew, calm down. First babies take a long time, we have hours yet." But she was wrong. This labor was much faster than her others had been. By the time Dr. Morrison arrived from town, Sarah was well into active labor, the contractions coming hard and fast. Matthew refused to leave her side despite the doctor's suggestion that he wait downstairs. He held her hand, wiped her forehead, whispered encouragements. "I have done this before," Sarah panted between contractions. "I know what I am doing." "I know you do. You are amazing, so strong." Matthew kissed her temple. "I love you so much, love you too, even though this is your fault." She squeezed his hand hard as another contraction hit. 3 hours after the labor started, Sarah gave birth to a healthy baby boy. The infant's first cry was loud and indignant, and Sarah laughed through her tears. Dr. Morrison cleaned the baby and wrapped him in a blanket before placing him in Sarah's arms. "He is perfect," Sarah whispered, staring down at the tiny face, the miniature features. "Matthew, look at him." Matthew was crying unashamedly, touching the baby's small hand with one finger. The infant's fist closed around it instinctively. "He is beautiful, he looks like you, he has your chin, and I think that is your nose. Poor kid." But Matthew was smiling. "What should we name him?" They had discussed names endlessly over the past months, but never quite decided. Now, looking at her son, Sarah knew. "I was thinking Michael Robert Brennan, after your father and mine. You want to use your first husband's name." Matthew looked surprised. "Robert gave me 3 beautiful children. He was a good man, and he deserves to be remembered. And I think it would mean a lot to Thomas and James and Mary to have their father honored this way." Matthew leaned down and kissed her, gentle and sweet. "Michael Robert Brennan it is. Welcome to the family, son." The other children were allowed in to meet their new brother shortly after. They tiptoed into the room, awed by the tiny baby. Mary touched his hand gently. "He is so small." "You were all this small once," Sarah told them, "and you all had this much hair too." Michael had a surprising amount of dark hair sticking up in all directions. "Can I hold him?" Thomas asked. "Sit in the chair and I will hand him to you." Sarah transferred the baby carefully, showing Thomas how to support the head. Her son held his new brother with remarkable gentleness, staring down at the infant with wonder. James peered over Thomas's shoulder. "He is kind of wrinkly." "All new babies are wrinkly, it smooths out." Sarah smiled at her family, her heart so full it felt like it might burst. "What do you all think of the name Michael?" "I like it," Mary said immediately. "Michael Brennan, it sounds strong. And his middle name is Robert," Matthew added. "After your father." The children's faces lit up. "Really?" Thomas asked, his voice thick. "You are naming him after Pa. Your father was a good man and he should be remembered. We thought this was a good way to do that." James, who had been so young when Robert died that his memories were faint, asked, "Will you tell me about my first Pa, so I can tell Michael when he is bigger?" "Of course we will," Sarah promised. "We will make sure you all remember him." The baby started to fuss, and Sarah took him back, beginning to nurse him. Matthew ushered the other children out to give her privacy, and she heard him talking to them in the hallway, his voice warm with love and pride. The next weeks were an exhausting blur of feedings and diaper changes and sleepless nights, but they were also filled with moments of pure joy. Watching Matthew with Michael, seeing the love on his face as he held his son, made Sarah fall in love with him all over again. He was a natural father, patient and gentle, and he insisted on doing his share of the nighttime duties despite having to work the ranch during the day. "You need your rest," he would say, taking the fussing baby from her arms. "I have got him. Go back to sleep." And Sarah, bone-tired and grateful, would watch for a moment as Matthew paced the room with Michael, humming softly, before drifting back to sleep. The older children were helpful too, especially Mary, who had a knack for soothing the baby when he was fussy. Thomas and James loved their new brother, though they were still getting used to all the attention a baby required. Matthew made sure to spend one-on-one time with each of them, taking them riding or fishing, making sure they knew they were still important, still loved. By the time Michael was 6 months old, Sarah had adjusted to being a mother of 4. The baby was sleeping better, smiling and cooing and starting to show his personality, which seemed to be equal parts cheerful and stubborn. "He definitely takes after both of us," Matthew joked. Life on the ranch continued its steady rhythm. The cattle business remained strong, and Matthew's hard work and smart management meant they were prosperous. He used some of the profits to improve the house, adding on a new wing with more bedrooms and a larger parlor. "For when we have more children," he said, and Sarah laughed. "More children? Are you trying to run your own school? I would not mind a few more if you are willing. I like the noise and chaos of a full house." He pulled her close, nuzzling her neck. "Besides, I enjoy the process of making babies with you. Matthew Brennan, you are incorrigible." But she was blushing and smiling. They did have more children. A daughter, Elizabeth Grace, arrived 2 years after Michael. Then another son, Daniel Matthew, came along 2 years after that. The house was indeed full of noise and chaos and love. Sarah, who had once wondered how she would feed 3 hungry children, now presided over a table that sat 9 comfortably, and often had more when the ranch hands joined them. The older children grew and thrived. Mary, at 16, was a beautiful young woman who had her mother's compassion and her stepfather's business sense. Matthew had begun teaching her more about ranch management, recognizing that she had a talent for it. Thomas, at 14, was already working alongside the ranch hands, learning the cattle business from the ground up. He had Matthew's way with horses and an uncanny ability to read the weather. James, at 12, was the family charmer, able to talk anyone into anything, with a laugh that could lighten any mood. Michael, at 6, was already showing signs of being a natural leader, organizing his younger siblings into elaborate games. Elizabeth, at 4, was sweet-tempered and creative, always drawing or making up songs. And Daniel, at 2, was a whirlwind of energy who kept everyone on their toes. Matthew thrived as a father and husband. The ranch had grown into one of the most successful in the territory, but he never let work come before family. He made time for each child, knew their hopes and fears, and supported their dreams. He loved Sarah with the same passion and devotion as the day they married, maybe more. As for Sarah, she sometimes could hardly believe this was her life. From the depths of poverty and despair to this abundance of love and security felt like something out of a fairy tale. But it was real. The man who held her each night was real. The children who filled her days with laughter were real. The home they had built together in this wild territory was real. One evening when Michael was 8, Sarah found Matthew on the porch as she often did at the end of the day. The older children were doing their evening chores, and the younger ones were playing in the yard. She settled into the chair next to her husband, taking the hand he automatically extended to her. "You remember the night we met?" she asked, watching the sun paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. "I remember everything about that night. You opened the door just a crack, like you were afraid of what I might want. You looked exhausted and proud and defiant all at once." Matthew squeezed her hand. "I knew right then that you were someone special. I thought you were either crazy or trying to take advantage of me somehow. I could not understand why anyone would want to help. And now I understand that there are good people in the world. People who help because they can, because it is the right thing to do. You changed my life, Matthew. You changed my children's lives. You gave us everything. No, Sarah, we gave each other everything." Matthew pulled her from her chair into his lap, and she went willingly, resting her head against his shoulder. "You gave me a family, a purpose, a reason to build something lasting. Before you, I was just a man with a ranch. Now I am a husband, a father, a man with roots and a legacy. That is all because of you." They sat together in comfortable silence, watching their children play. Mary had Elizabeth on her shoulders while Thomas and James were teaching Michael to throw a lasso. Daniel was toddling after them, demanding to be included. It was a scene of perfect, ordinary happiness, and Sarah treasured it. "You ever miss him?" Matthew asked quietly. "Your first husband." It was not the first time he had asked, and Sarah knew it came from a place of security, not insecurity. Matthew knew she loved him. This was just his way of making sure Robert was not forgotten. "I miss the man he was, the life we had. But Matthew, I want you to understand something. What I have with you is different but not less. You are not a replacement or a second choice. You are the love of my life, the partner I was meant to find. Robert and I had our time and it was good. But you and I, we have something extraordinary, something that gets stronger every day. They will never know hunger again under my roof." That is what I told myself that night when I saw your children. I did not know then that I would fall in love with their mother. I did not know I would come to love them like my own blood. I just knew they needed help and I could give it. And you did. You kept your promise, Matthew. My children have never known hunger since that day. They have known nothing but love and security and plenty, and it is all because of you. Because of us, Matthew corrected. Because of the family we built together. As the stars began to appear, one by one, Sarah reflected on the journey that had brought her here. The pain of loss, the fear of poverty, the exhaustion of trying to keep her children alive on her own. And then the miracle of Matthew Brennan, appearing in her darkest hour like an answer to prayer. The slow building of trust, the sweet unfolding of love, the joy of creating a family together. She thought about her 6 children, all loved equally and completely, biological connections mattering not at all. She thought about the ranch, prosperous and growing, a legacy for the next generation. She thought about the man whose arms held her, whose heart beat steady beneath her ear, whose love had saved her and healed her and made her whole again. "I love you," she whispered into the gathering darkness. "I love you too," Matthew whispered back. "Today, tomorrow, and all the days after. You are my heart, Sarah Brennan. You and our children, you are everything." And sitting there on the porch of the ranch house in Oro Grande, New Mexico territory, surrounded by the evidence of their love and their life together, Sarah knew with absolute certainty that she was exactly where she was meant to be. The hungry days were behind them. The hard times were past. Ahead lay only the future, bright and promising, full of love and laughter and the beautiful chaos of family. They had been through the fire and come out stronger. They had faced the worst and found the best. And together, they would face whatever came next, secure in the knowledge that their love could weather any storm. The years continued to pass in a blur of birthdays and holidays and everyday moments that built a life. Mary married at 20, a fine young rancher from a neighboring spread whom Matthew thoroughly vetted before giving his blessing. The wedding was held at the ranch, and Sarah cried happy tears as she watched her oldest daughter pledge her life to the man she loved. Thomas took over more and more responsibility on the ranch, proving himself a capable manager and earning the respect of the hands. James surprised everyone by developing an interest in the law, and Matthew arranged for him to apprentice with a lawyer in Santa Fe. The younger children grew as well. Michael became a serious, thoughtful boy with a gift for mechanics and engineering. Elizabeth discovered a talent for music and begged for a piano, which Matthew had shipped all the way from St. Louis. Daniel remained the wild child, always into something, keeping his parents on their toes. And through it all, Sarah and Matthew's love deepened and matured. They had their disagreements, of course, their moments of frustration or misunderstanding, but they had built their relationship on a foundation of mutual respect and genuine affection, and that foundation held strong. They learned each other's rhythms, anticipated each other's needs, found joy in the simple daily acts of partnership. On their 10th anniversary, Matthew took Sarah on a trip to Denver, their first time away from the children for more than a night. They stayed in a fine hotel, ate at restaurants, saw a theatrical performance. It was wonderful and exciting, but what Sarah remembered most was the quiet morning when they sat in their hotel room, drinking coffee and talking about nothing in particular. And Matthew said, "I would not trade our life for anything in the world, not even for all the wealth in Colorado." Sarah teased, "Not even for that. Our family, our ranch, our life together, that is worth more than all the gold in the Rockies." Matthew set down his coffee cup and pulled her close. "You made all my dreams come true, Sarah, every single one. You made mine come true too. I used to think my story was over when Robert died. I thought the best I could hope for was survival, but you showed me I could have more than that. You gave me love and partnership and a future worth believing in." When they returned to the ranch, the children had planned a surprise party. The house was decorated with ribbons and flowers, and Cookie had made a special cake. Friends and neighbors from all over the territory had come to celebrate with them. Sarah looked around at the crowded room, at the faces of people who had become family, and felt overwhelmed with gratitude. Matthew made a toast. 10 years ago, I married the most remarkable woman I had ever met. She had 3 children, no money, and more courage in her little finger than most men have in their whole body. I thought I was helping her, but the truth is, she saved me. She turned a house into a home, a ranch into a legacy, and a lonely cowboy into the happiest man alive. Sarah, my love, here is to the next 10 years and the 10 after that, and all the years that follow until we are old and gray and surrounded by grandchildren. The room erupted in cheers. Sarah stood and kissed her husband, not caring that everyone was watching. "To the future," she said, "and to the love that makes it all worthwhile." And so their life continued, full and rich and blessed. The ranch prospered. The children grew and thrived and eventually began families of their own. Mary gave them their first grandchild, a boy named Robert Matthew, and Sarah wept when she held him, thinking of all the turns her life had taken to bring her to this moment. More grandchildren followed. Thomas married and had 3 daughters who were the light of his life. James finished his legal training and opened a practice in Oro Grande, eventually marrying a schoolteacher and having 2 sons. Michael took over more of the ranch operations as Matthew grew older, proving himself every bit his father's son, though they shared no blood. Elizabeth married a musician and moved to San Francisco, but she visited often with her growing brood. Even Daniel, the wild child, eventually settled down with a widow who had a young daughter, and Matthew and Sarah delighted in the irony. As they moved into their 60s, Matthew and Sarah began to step back from the day-to-day operations of the ranch, trusting it to Michael and Thomas. They had more time for each other, for long rides across the property, for quiet evenings on the porch, for visits with their children and grandchildren. One evening, sitting in their usual spot watching the sunset, Sarah said, "We have had a good life, have we not?" "The best," Matthew agreed. He was grayer now, his face more lined, but his eyes still held the same warmth and love they had held 30 years ago. "No regrets, not a single one. Well, maybe I regret that time I let Michael talk me into letting him keep that raccoon in the house." Matthew laughed. "That was a disaster. But even that is a good memory now. Everything is a good memory. Every moment with you has been a gift." Sarah took his hand, their fingers intertwining automatically after so many years. "Thank you for finding me. Thank you for saving us. Thank you for letting me. Thank you for taking a chance on a cowboy who could not believe his luck." Matthew raised her hand to his lips, kissing it gently. "I love you, Sarah Brennan. I have loved you since the moment you opened that cabin door looking fierce and frightened and beautiful. I love you too. More than I ever thought possible." They sat in comfortable silence as the sky blazed with color and then slowly faded to twilight. Around them, the ranch hummed with life. In the distance, they could hear Michael talking to the hands about tomorrow's work. From the house came the sound of their youngest grandchildren playing, visiting for the week. It was the sound of legacy, of continuity, of a life well lived. "You remember what you said to me that first night?" Sarah asked. "You said my children would never know hunger again under your roof." "I remember. It was a promise. You kept it. They never did, not for a single day, and neither did their children or their children's children. You built something lasting, Matthew, something that will go on long after we are gone. We built it together." Matthew pulled her close, and she rested her head on his shoulder, right where it belonged. "Everything good in my life I owe to you." They watched the stars emerge one by one, the same stars that had witnessed their courtship, their wedding, the births of their children, all the joys and sorrows of their life together. And in that moment, Sarah felt complete peace. Whatever came next, whatever challenges or changes the future held, they would face it together, just as they always had. The love that had started with a simple act of kindness, with a cowboy who could not stand by while children went hungry, had grown into something magnificent. It had weathered every storm, overcome every obstacle, and emerged stronger each time. It was the kind of love that poets wrote about, that songs celebrated, that everyone hoped to find but few did. And Sarah and Matthew had found it. Against all odds, in the midst of hardship and loss, they had found each other. And in finding each other, they had found home, family, purpose, and joy that lasted a lifetime. As they finally stood to go inside, Matthew said, "Race you to bed." Sarah laughed, the sound young and carefree despite her years. "You are on, old man." They walked into the house hand in hand, closing the door on another perfect day and looking forward to all the days to come. Behind them, the ranch settled into night, secure and prosperous, a testament to hard work and love. Above them, the stars shone bright and clear over the New Mexico territory, bearing silent witness to a love story for the ages. And in the years that followed, as Matthew and Sarah grew old together, surrounded by children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren, the story of how they met became family legend. The tale of a widow in desperate circumstances and a cowboy who could not stand by and do nothing. The story of how he had promised her children would never know hunger again, and how that promise had been the foundation of a love that transformed all their lives. When Matthew passed peacefully in his sleep at the age of 78, Sarah was beside him, holding his hand as she had held it through 3 decades of marriage. And though her heart broke at the loss, she knew she had been blessed beyond measure. She had loved 2 good men in her life, had raised 6 beautiful children, and had lived to see them all happy and settled. She had gone from poverty and despair to abundance and joy, and it had all started with one man's compassion and one woman's courage to accept help when she needed it most. Sarah lived another 5 years, watching her grandchildren marry and her great-grandchildren grow. She remained on the ranch that Matthew had built and that they had filled with love, surrounded always by family. And when she finally passed, also peacefully in her sleep, she was laid to rest beside Matthew in the small cemetery overlooking the ranch, under a headstone that read, "Sarah Brennan, beloved wife, mother, and grandmother." She knew hardship and triumph, loss and love, and she faced it all with courage and grace. The ranch continued under Michael's capable management, passed down through the generations, a lasting legacy of the love between a widow and a cowboy who had saved each other. And though Sarah and Matthew were gone, their love lived on in the family they had created, in the values they had instilled, in the ranch that stood as proof that one act of kindness could change everything. Their story became a tale told and retold, of how Sarah Emerson had been at her lowest point, watching her children starve, when Matthew Brennan had appeared with an offer she had almost refused. How he had promised her children would never know hunger again under his roof, and how he had kept that promise every day of his life. How they had fallen in love slowly and surely, building something beautiful from the ashes of Sarah's old life. It was a story of the Wild West, of hardship and survival, but more than that, it was a love story. A reminder that even in the darkest times, hope could appear in unexpected forms, that kindness could transform lives, that love, real love, could heal old wounds and create new dreams. And so the story of Sarah and Matthew lived on, passed from generation to generation, a family treasure more valuable than the successful ranch or the material wealth they had accumulated. It was the story of 2 people who had found each other at exactly the right moment, who had chosen love over fear, hope over despair, and who had built a life that was richer than either had ever imagined possible. In the end, that was their true legacy. Not the land or the cattle or the money, but the love. The love that had started with a cowboy's promise and a widow's courage. The love that had grown and deepened over the years, weathering every storm. The love that had created a family and a home, and a heritage that would endure long after they were gone. And somewhere in heaven, if such things were possible, Sarah and Matthew were together again, watching over the ranch and the family they had created, satisfied that their love story had not ended but continued on in every generation that followed. Their promise had been kept. Their children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren would never know hunger or want. They would know only love, security, and the knowledge that they came from strong stock, from people who had faced the worst and found the best, who had loved deeply and lived fully and left the world better than they found it. That was the story of Sarah and Matthew Brennan. And it was a story worth telling, worth remembering, worth celebrating for all the years to come. Because in a harsh and unforgiving land, they had created something soft and enduring. In a time of hardship and struggle, they had found joy and abundance. And in each other, they had found home. The end.